ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving on to how New Netherland, which was owned by the Dutch, becomes New York, which is owned by the English. So we're looking at the time frame of 1630 to 1700. We're going to go ahead and start on page 116 if you'd like to follow along with your book in social studies. Otherwise, just follow along with me. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and focus on two key words. One is tyrant and one is self-government. By the early 1600s, England had started its own colonies in North America. These colonies lay to the north and south of New Netherland. Most of them were growing faster than the Dutch colony. Both the Dutch and the English claimed lands in the Connecticut River Valley and on Long Island. Soon, English colonists began to settle on those lands. Peter Stuyvesant asked the English government to stop setting up towns on Dutch lands, but the English ignored his request. Dutch colonists began to fear that the English would take over New Netherland. We have a little picture here at the bottom. It says in 1664, the village near Fort Orange was renamed Albany. That's our state capital. Years later, Dutch-style buildings still lined Pearl Street. New challenges. In New Netherland, people in Dutch towns and English towns had to be loyal to the Dutch West India Company and follow its laws. However, each town had its own kind of government. The biggest difference between these town governments was that in English towns, landowners voted to elect their leaders. It's on the crossword. In Dutch towns, the colony leaders appointed other leaders. New Amsterdam was a Dutch city. However, its government was different from those of other Dutch towns. One reason for this was the power of the merchants. Since trade was the main business in New Amsterdam, wealthy merchants had a strong voice in city life. Many of them did not like the way Stuyvesant ran the city. If you remember, they said he was strict. They felt that his orders were too strict. Stuyvesant made laws that controlled the prices of goods, such as bread and meat. Another law forced everyone to go to church on Sundays. Many people believed that Stuyvesant had become a tyrant, or a leader who rules harshly. In 1649, city leaders asked the Dutch West India Company to let them set up self-government for the city. This would allow the colonists to make their own laws and decisions. The company granted New Amsterdam self-government. Under this system of government, a group of city leaders and merchants would help Stuyvesant govern. However, instead of holding elections, Stuyvesant chose the leaders himself. Stuyvesant believed that he was doing what was the best for the people, but many of the colonists disagreed. So here we have English and Dutch settlements. Your English settlements are in orange, looks like quite a few more, and here are Dutch settlements in pink. If you look at the United States, let's see if we can zoom in on that. It's only this little area right here that the colonies have been set up. And then we have a little image down here. Dutch and German coins called thalers were used in New Amsterdam. So that's what their coins look like. So we start off with this picture. It says, Peter Stuyvesant left New Netherland for Amsterdam on August 29th, 1664. He had been governor of New Netherland for 17 years. Looks like the English are taking over, and that's what our next heading is. The English take control. In 1664, King Charles II of England decided to give his brother James, the Duke of York and Albany, all the land between the Connecticut and Delaware rivers. The Duke of York's new lands included almost all of New Netherland. So the English king, gave his brother the Dutch's land. The Duke of York sent 4 warships to take New Netherland away from the Dutch. The English ships arrived off the coast of New Amsterdam in August 1664. English Colonel Richard Nichols ordered Stuyvesant to give up New Amsterdam. He said that if Stuyvesant did not surrender the city, the English would attack. Panic spread through New Amsterdam. Stuyvesant tried to get the colonists to fight the English, but the colonists refused. They knew they were outnumbered. New Amsterdam had fewer than 150 soldiers, while the English had more than 300. This here is the English flag in 1664. Colonel Nichols offers Stuyvesant a peace agreement. Under this agreement, Dutch colonists could keep their homes, businesses, and farms. City leaders and merchants told Stuyvesant to surrender. On August 27th, Stuyvesant and the city leaders agreed to turn over New Netherland to the English. Soon after, the Dutch colonists near Fort Orange also surrendered to the English. Stuyvesant left the colony after its surrender, which was the picture that we saw, but he later returned to live in the area. The English renamed many of the colony's settlements in honor of the Duke of York. New Netherland became the English colony of New York, and New Amsterdam became New York City. The village near Fort Orange became the city of Albany. But the Dutch didn't go away so fast. They left a lot of information behind, a lot of their influence behind. So let's see what they did. A lasting Dutch influence. Some Dutch colonists returned to the Netherlands. However, many others stayed in the new English colony. The Dutch people living in New York worked to keep their culture alive. They continued to speak the Dutch language for many years. More than 80 years after New York became an English colony, a visitor to Albany wrote about the people whose families had been Dutch settlers. They speak Dutch, have Dutch preachers, and their manners are likewise quite Dutch. The Dutch heritage can still be seen in New York State today. Words such as cookie, coleslaw, sleigh, and waffle come from Dutch. Dutch building styles can still be seen in communities along the Hudson River and in New York City. And there's something else. In this picture, they show the Tulip Festival in Albany begins with a ceremonial street sweeping. Street sweeping is a Dutch tradition that dates back to the 1600s. So this is a festival still happening. And this says heritage, means what has been handed down. Dutch festivals in New York. The Dutch brought many of their traditions to North America. One of those traditions was a springtime religious celebration they called Pinkster. The first Pinkster festivals included Dutch traditions, such as sharing dyed eggs and scrubbing the streets. During Pinkster, enslaved Africans were allowed to stop working and take part in African celebrations. Over time, other celebrations, such as Albany's Tulip Festival, grew out of Pinkster. The Wyckoff House in Brooklyn has both a Tulip Festival and a Pinkster celebration. So that's still happening today, over 400 years later. That is lasting for sure. Parts of New York City are still called by their Dutch names: the Bowery, Brooklyn, Harlem, and Coney Island. Outside of the city are other places with Dutch names, such as Rensselaer, Rotterdam, and Peekskill. The Dutch heritage includes some special celebrations. For example, the Dutch observe a holiday in December called St. Nicholas Day. Are you sensing where we're going next? The Dutch call St. Nicholas Sinterklaas, which sounds like Santa Claus to an English speaker. Santa Claus later became a part of the American Christmas tradition. And here we have a picture of tulips remain a symbol of Dutch culture in New York today. Some parts of Harlem in New York City and are known for their historic Dutch-style buildings. So we've got tulips and the buildings. So the Dutch definitely left a lot. All right, you should have had a crossword with this activity, I believe. So please make sure that you are working on that crossword and getting it done. Good luck.